Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. I hope you hear me well. On today's agenda, we have to complete the review of CRP3 on the Global Biodiversity Framework and the completion of the first reading of Item 10 on invasive alien species. I would like to ensure that we complete our review of CRP3 by the break time, so we can pick up Item 10 afterwards. I thank you in advance for your comprehension and collaboration. Colleagues, I would like to remind you that it is not our practice or procedure to project CRPs on the screen. Instead, any changes to the text are captured by the Secretariat and read out as necessary. The Substat Bureau has decided not to change the usual practice at this meeting. Colleagues may find it helpful to follow along on their own screen as the changes are read out. I also would like to invite all participants to read their specific suggestions for the text at dictation speed and clearly indicate the part of paragraph or sentence where they would like to place the suggested change. Yesterday we started CRP3 and had reached the end of paragraph 3 when we ran out of time. My intention is to continue to consider this entire CRP paragraph by paragraph and try to remove the square brackets where we can. I will now open the floor for any further comments on paragraph 3. That you may remind that I also put one paragraph out too as a proposal from the chair with clean text if acceptable. I see Morocco. Morocco, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Good day, everybody. Chair, you have made a choice for paragraph 3 alt 2. My delegation supports that option because it is simple, clear, and precise and concise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Lemoral. Now I give the floor to Belgium, followed by Colombia and Mexico.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We could live with the proposal you made. We just feel that the words "as appropriate" don't fit in the paragraph. So the proposal is fine with the words "as appropriate" in the second line to be deleted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for the support, your support and your suggestion. Now I give the floor to Colombia and Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to support Morocco and Belgium with respect to keeping paragraph 3L2. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Colombia. Ahora doy la palabra a...
Thank you very much, Colombia. And now Mexico, followed by the UK. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair. Mexico would also like to support Belgium and Colombia and Morocco on Alt 2 and to delete "as appropriate" before "by the subsidiary body." And we have a slight problem with the last phrase where it says "and thereafter to keep the monitoring framework under review." What we've understood from that is that the monitoring framework would be finalised for review in the 16th COP, and we would just review the component and complementary indicators then. But if we leave this phrase, it seems as if we're going to continue to review it. So perhaps we could add only for components and complementary indicators, or else delete this part to put across the idea that the monitoring framework is for a given period in terms of its review. And then it's adopted. We don't want to be continually reviewing the monitoring framework all the time, continually. At least once we've got the headline indicators ready so that we can report on them. Now, if you have a specific text for the last phrase, you could read it. No, I don't have a specific text, but something like only for components and complements or something like that. And thereafter to keep the monitoring framework under review for components and complements. Well, SBSTA is going to be reviewing in the future this. Is going to be reviewing this in the future. I think the expression is more open where it says SBSTA is working on this. And then for the next COP, it will present this, but it will still keep monitoring it. So I'd ask Mexico to be flexible. Could we try and maintain this with this open wording so that SBSTA continues to review monitoring in the future? So could we keep it flexible so that we're not adding more to this paragraph that already has support with that brief amendment, so that we can then make progress, please? But if you want to give me a more complete text suggestion, we can do that. Thank you, Chair.
Followed by Uganda and Sweden, and I hope we can take a decision on this paragraph on our two. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would be pleased to work on your suggestion 3 out 2, but we think it can be simplified. Firstly, we think it's not the role of COP to undertake a scientific and technical review, but rather it's the role of COP to consider the results of a scientific and technical review. And it's the role of SBSTA to undertake that review. We would suggest therefore to delete undertake and put consider, so decides to consider, and then we would delete the reference in this paragraph to the subsidiary body for subsequent consideration of the conference of the parties. So it would be a shorter paragraph which reads, decides to consider a scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework in order to finish its development, and we can accept deletion as appropriate. At its 16th meeting, and thereafter to keep the monitoring framework under review. But as our intervention in the last session was, we would also suggest then adding another paragraph 11 bis, which is a specific request to SBSTA to review the outcomes of the RTEG and to complete the scientific and technical review for consideration of the Conference of the Parties. We think that makes it clearer that the respective roles of the Conference of the Parties, the RTEG and SBSTA in this process. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. I thought we were... so your suggestion is to limit only to COP work and then to have a new paragraph for SBSTA. What we were trying originally here is to make this combination of COP undertaking this scientific review by the next conference of the parties. The suggestion is to delete substance at this stage and undertaking again later as a new paragraph 11. I am wondering if we can, I will listen a couple of suggestions more while trying to do both things here, because probably we can, as UK suggests, consider the scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework in order to finish its development by the next conference of the parties, 16. And thereafter to keep the monitoring framework under review by SBSTA. So maybe that can be a short way and with no need for an additional 11. I hope that can be a way forward. But I will listen Uganda followed by Sweden.
Thank you, Chair. I think as pointed out by UK yesterday, there is considerable overlap between what is proposed in paragraph 3 and what is proposed in the terms of reference for the ATEG, and also in paragraph 11 that establishes the ATEG. I think we need to remove that overlap and the idea of shortening paragraph 3 so that it is simple, it is short, but it still makes reference to the work of the ATEG, and therefore delete the rest of the text that is in paragraph 3. Uganda had come up with a new formulation or framing for paragraph 3 that is short, that is simple, but I think the new framing as proposed by the UK seems to make sense, and so would like to go along with that. If you look at the terms of reference for the ATEG, the bulk of the work in terms of reviewing the operationalization of the monitoring framework will actually be carried out by the ATEG, because they'll be looking at detailed metadata, prioritizing headline indicators, improvement of indicators, addition of new indicators, remaining and unresolved issues, data gaps, capacity gaps. And this is all part of what this technical and scientific review is supposed to do also. And so that overlap has to go. So in terms of consistency, but also in terms of making simple and short, I think let's go with the Uganda supports the proposal by the UK with regard to making paragraph 3 very simple. Very
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Uganda. Now I'll give the floor to Sweden.
Good afternoon, everyone. We can support UK's proposal on paragraph 3, but we would add in the end and thereafter we assess the need for further review. So it's clear that we have the option open to deal with a further review if needed. That said, we are also open to support Belgium's proposal as long as we take away as appropriate in that formulation.
All right. I see support from the new formulation, the short one by the UK. I will ask Secretariat to read how sounds the short way, and then later we will deal with a paragraph to address to SBSTA and on the terms of reference. Please, Secretariat.
Decides to consider a scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework in order to finish its development at its 16th meeting, and thereafter, with the new text, reassess the need for further review to keep the monitoring framework under review.
Thank you, Secretariat. I don't know, we need to work on a little bit on the last part to have clarity. I'm not a native English speaker, but the point is that we will assess if there is a need for this review, or if for native speakers sounds okay, but this is pretty much the idea to make it simple, right? Do you have any proposal, Secretariat, or sounds good?
To me, I think assess would be logical, and then thereafter assess the need for review.
Full stop.
Full stop. And if you did want to I mean, there have been back and forth on the phrase whether or not to put as appropriate in brackets, but that could easily be added to this paragraph if that's any of the concerns that people have, which as it came up in the original alt and alt 2.
Right. How about if we stop the paragraph for further review? And please read again for full understanding of all parties.
Yes. Decides to consider a scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework in order to finish its development at its 16th meeting, and thereafter assess the need for further review.
Right. I hope that formulation can be acceptable for paragraph 3, and then we can deal with the specifics for SBSTA if needed when we reach paragraph 11. I would like to see if there is any objection to this new formulation, the short one. I see Norway followed by Argentina.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for working on the text. Actually, we would prefer the wording that was originally put forward by the UK to keep the under review. I believe that's the same language we've used for the Aichi targets. And of course, keeping it under review would entail that we would work out the details on how to do that later on. So I think that also covers some of the concerns that was raised by Sweden. So we prefer to keep the text that was submitted by the UK. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norway. So that we read, and thereafter keep the monitoring framework under review instead of assessing it for further review. Okay, Argentina tiene la palabra, followed by Switzerland.
You have the floor, Argentina, and then Switzerland. Thank you, Chair. Good day. On this last phrase, it's not really clear to us what it would mean to say assess the need for further review. It would seem we're constantly reviewing to see whether COP has to review the monitoring framework again or not. So perhaps we could say, and thereafter keep the monitoring framework under review. And in the last part, perhaps there we could put in as appropriate, and thereafter as appropriate to keep the monitoring framework under review. So that's where we could put in the as appropriate. Yes, thank you very much, Argentina. And I'd ask the Secretariat to read out the text again. Dropping assess the need and keeping in to keep the monitoring framework under review.
Norway.
So one more time. Decides to consider a scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework in order to finish its development at its 16th meeting, and thereafter keep the monitoring framework under review as appropriate.
Right. I hope that formulation is acceptable. I ask if there is any objection to this language. I see Switzerland and South Africa. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, in general, I think this sentence as it stands now is acceptable for Switzerland. Maybe just a comment. We have similar concerns as Mexico also mentioned, that we should not prolong, the review and assessment. So in our understanding, this keep the monitoring framework under review, this would clearly be the task of SBSTA or the COP or the regular bodies, but not any other review. So I think with this understanding, we can accept this text as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe with the words as appropriate is also covered in Mexico's concern. So we need to define clear. Of course, we will see the outcomes of the technical expert group and SBSTA and to see if there is anything. And that will be a decision of the COP at the 16th meeting. So I hope this is acceptable, and thank you for the flexibility of Switzerland, and I hope also from Mexico. South Africa, last intervention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I didn't get the last reading of the paragraph, but if it is our proposal was to remove a reference to scientific and technical review, because this is work that is going to be done by the Conference of the Parties and not necessarily the subsidiary body. So if the involvement of the subsidiary body will not be limited to Substa, it will also be the SBI, because the strategic, the post 2020 global biodiversity framework, whilst it is still about biodiversity, there are some elements that are not necessarily scientific in that document. So for us, I think it will be useful not to refer to scientific and technical, and just to repeat what I think it was the European Union that spoke about. When the language that we used when we adopted the framework for the strategic plan for 2020, we just spoke about we are going to keep this under review without using the term scientific and technical. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. So your suggestion is to keep it general, to consider a review of the monitoring framework, because we are referring here to the Conference of the Parties, in the understanding that we're establishing a technical expert group, and then Substa will take a look and then report to COP, and COP will see the whole part. So the paragraph with this suggestion from South Africa would say, decides to consider a review of the monitoring framework in order to finish its development at its 16th meeting, and thereafter keep the monitoring framework under review as appropriate. That will be the text. I see no more requests from the floor. So paragraph 3 is adopted. Thank you very much. Let's move to paragraph 4. I open the floor for paragraph 4, which has no brackets. I see Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Although Canada has no substantive concerns with paragraph 4, we do find it more appropriate for SBI, along with paragraphs 5, 6, and 7, for example, with the focus on national reporting. And so we do wonder whether these paragraphs would be better placed in SBI text instead, to keep things clean and simple again.
So your suggestion, Canada, is to delete paragraphs 4, 5, and 6?
4, 5, 6, and 7 we find more appropriate for SBI instead.
I'll give 1 minute to parties to take a look on this proposal from Canada. If there is agreement to delete these paragraphs and to consider for SBI purposes. I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Sweden.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to support Canada's proposal. In fact, the proposed modifications for this paragraph are very much related with the discussions that are taking place at the moment in the contact group on agenda item 9 of SBI. So we think we're going to be rounding off similar discussions on these paragraphs there. The proposal is directly linked to how to implement the monitoring framework. And so it's correct what Canada has said. We don't want to duplicate our negotiations in two spaces within the same convention. Thank you.
Very much, Argentina. You support the deletion of paragraphs 4 to 7. Now I give the floor to Sweden, followed by Belgium.
Thank you, Chair. We cannot agree on the removal of all these paragraphs. We would like to bracket them, and we would like to discuss at least paragraph 7. I think it's important content here, and we see that there are issues that need to be solved by SBI, and we can include SBI decisions at the later stage. But we would like to bracket them, keep them, and discuss at least paragraph 7. Thank you.
Thank you, Sweden. I give the floor to Belgium, followed by UK.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for this little echo. We can fully support the intervention just made by Sweden, and we'll make it short. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. UK, followed by Mexico and Norway.
Thank you, Chair. We do find these paragraphs very useful in setting out clearly how the different indicators could be used, and very important in relation to the development of the monitoring framework, because it's very clear that the choices we have to make around the headline indicators and other indicators in the monitoring framework depend very much on the way that being used and how these paragraphs are set out. So we would like to retain these paragraphs. They could be retained in brackets because there is, as co-chair of the contact group on review mechanisms, putting a different hat on, there is a clear relationship there. But we think it's also important that these elements are kept here because they do provide that framing for the monitoring framework. Thank you very much, Chair.
Mexico.
Mexico, please.
For Canada's suggestion and supported by Argentina to delete this paragraph, just as long as they are taken into account in the SBI in the way they are. We see some repetition, and there are issues that we are dealing in the SBI negotiations. So we would like to support to delete them just to make this text simpler, but just as long as these issues are considered in the SBI decision. Thank you.
Gracias, Mexico. I still have a request from the floor, but maybe a possible way forward, if you agree, is to maintain these paragraphs 4 to 7 in brackets, in the understanding that since this document will turn into an L document for next face-to-face meeting, we can ensure consistency between the outcomes of SBI and this one. And then we can take a better decision to avoid duplication, since part of reporting is the role as well of SBI. But to keep the content on this, I remind you that these paragraphs are clean with no brackets. I hear particular comments from one party on paragraph 7. But if you agree with this approach, we just keep these paragraphs in brackets and we can continue with our deliberations. Is there anyone opposing to my proposal to bracket these paragraphs for further consideration when we have an L document? And also we have the outcomes from SBI in order to ensure a good alignment to avoid duplications. I would like to see if there's any opposition. I see Switzerland followed by Sweden. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So in general, we support the UK. It's important to keep these paragraphs 4 to 7, especially paragraph 5 for us is essential. And we also understand this paragraph has not been discussed in the contact group. So And we have some comments regarding paragraph 5. So my question is, can we make these comments now? Should we discuss it now? These are important comments in our view.
Okay, I see your points, and it will be difficult if later we want to reopen discussions on this. I see some parties wanting to keep the text. I see at least 3 parties proposing the deletion, so there is no consensus, but also the wish to make some comments on particular paragraphs. This will take more time, but I can take comments for the register in the understanding that these paragraphs will be in brackets, not because we don't like the language, but to ensure a good alignment with the works of with SBI. So what I will do is to very quickly go paragraph by paragraph if there are additions or comments to improve. But please, we're speaking about clean text, and we need to make substantial progress with the remaining paragraphs and also the terms of reference. And we already spent half an hour. I hope we can do everything in less than an hour and to finish with this document before the break. So I encourage you to be very precise. So I will I see Sweden, and then I will proceed with paragraph by paragraph to make these comments. Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As mentioned, we really want to keep this paragraphs, and we have additions on paragraph 7. As Switzerland said, we never discussed this text, so that's why there are no brackets. And we really would like to get the chance to at least provide our input to those. And I will raise my hand on paragraph 7 again. Thank you.
Okay. So I call for comments on paragraph 4. Argentina.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. As other delegations have already highlighted, the text is clean because we haven't had time in the contact group to discuss this. Now, on this paragraph, it's not quite clear yet what the global assessments will actually entail. We would like to put global assessments in brackets. So it would read then.
Goals and targets. Y el global assessment, tenerlo entre corchetes hasta que la discusión sobre cómo serían estos assessments.
The global assessments need to be put in square brackets until we resolve what's actually going to happen with the global assessments. Thank you. So we'll put in square brackets global assessments.
Tina could read exactly what he was proposing again.
Yes, sure. So currently, in our view, the paragraph at this point should read, indicators will be used, square brackets, in global assessment, close square brackets, to monitor progress. And this is given that discussions around how and what will be the content of these global assessments are underway, and until that point, we would like to keep the expression between square brackets. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Argentina.
Thank you very much to Argentina. Now, global assessments are something that we do in the CBD through the GBO. But we can maintain that in square brackets as Argentina has requested.
Comments on paragraph 5. I open the floor for comments on paragraph 5, Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So on paragraph 5, we think this is a crucial part in the reporting mechanism. And in our view, and as mentioned already several times, for us it's crucial that parties will use the headline indicators in their national reports, and not just should. In our view, this is very important. So we suggest to replace the headline indicators should be used. Instead of should, it should say will be used by parties. So this is the first point. And then the second point in the last line, it currently says where technically feasible and as appropriate. In our view, there must be an objective reason why headline indicators are not applicable. For example, in our view, marine indicators would not be applicable for Switzerland as a landlocked country. So therefore, instead of as appropriate, we suggest to say and as applicable. So I can read the whole paragraph again, just to make sure that you got the changes. Also decides that headline indicators will be used by parties in their national reports for reporting on the implementation of the post-2020 framework, where technically feasible and as applicable. Thank you very much,
Switzerland. So this paragraph will have two words in brackets. The first line, should and will, and then in the last sentence, appropriate and applicable.
Exactly.
That's your suggestion. Okay. More comments on paragraph 5. Brazil, followed by Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good time of the day to you. We would suggest adding at the end of paragraph 5, in accordance with Article 20, given the fact that during the discussions in the contact group, we have seen many parties, including Brazil, to express concern on the financial and technical implications of the monitoring framework, especially for developing countries. So we would like to add at the end of paragraph 5, in accordance with Article 20 of the Convention.
Thank you very much, Brazil.
Thank you.
This insertion also be in brackets. You understand that all these paragraphs will be considered when in an L document. Now we give the floor to Colombia, followed by Uganda, on paragraph 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to share Brazil's concern on the need to ensure some mechanism to support developing countries in filling the monitoring and reporting gaps that we have said we will have, even if we want to use headline indicators. There are some implications for developing countries that need to be taken into account, but the document is not considering any paragraph regarding this concern. Therefore, we had drafted another language that we would like to include here at the end of the paragraph, and it would read as follows: and encourages the establishment of mechanisms to build capacity in developing countries to support filling, monitoring, and reporting gaps. We believe it's very important to keep a text in this regard here. And we would also like to support Switzerland with respect to the text they proposed on will be used by parties. We believe this is very important. And also we think that these headline indicators should be used by all parties. So we would like to include the word all before parties in the first line of the paragraph. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Colombia, por favor, puede repetir a velocidad de dictado.
Colombia, could you please repeat that at dictation speed for the last phrase, your suggestion?
Read. And encourages the establishment of mechanisms to build capacity in developing countries to support filling, monitoring, and reporting gaps.
Thank you, Colombia. You have a dog, right? All right. So we include this text at the end of the paragraph in brackets, and also the word all. And we move on that. I would like to remind you that we should do our best as submitting as a scientific and technical and technological body. Seems very clear to me these elements are probably more appropriate for SBI, but I'm in your hands. Of course, we're collecting your comments on this text, and let's move on. Uganda, on paragraph 5.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Uganda would like to support the intervention by Brazil and Colombia. Uganda had actually proposed text to be added to the end of the paragraph regarding the need to ensure that there is capacity for consistent use of a set of agreed and harmonized headline indicators at the national level. But I think the text by Colombia, we can live with that. The reasoning is that the background documentation for the monitoring framework clearly points out that headline indicators should constitute the main components of national reports and also support national planning processes. And one of the attributes of headline indicators that is a key factor in their selection and uptake is that they allow consistent and scalable now, if this is not done, there is going to be disjointed efforts in terms of consistent and reporting at the global level. So we feel that this capacity, therefore, has to be part of this formulation. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Thank you, Uganda, and for aligning with previous suggestions. So we don't include more language because your concerns reflect with the proposal from Colombia. And now we give the floor to Norway on paragraph 5. I invite you to move on the next paragraphs. Time is running.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to say, coming back to your comment on the consistency, we see the tax introduced by Colombia as probably being related to the decision we will have on capacity building, but we're fine to keep it in the brackets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All these new insertions are in bracket and will be considered on the L document when we have more clear the panorama after the outcomes from SBI and Substa. Now I open the floor to paragraph 6. Comments on paragraph 6. I see no request from the floor on paragraph 6. Let's move to paragraph 7, South Africa. South Africa followed by, yes, South Africa followed by Argentina. South Africa disappeared from my screen. Then I give the floor meanwhile to Argentina. Argentina tiene la palabra.
Argentina, you have the floor. This paragraph refers to a specific process, namely for planning processes. So we need to clarify at the end of the paragraph with as appropriate and according to national priorities and circumstances. So you want that included at the end, yes, at the end of the paragraph, as appropriate and according to national circumstances and priorities.
Por favor, sí. Muchas gracias.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Argentina?
EU, European Union asking for the floor. No, I don't see more requests. Thank you very much. Now I open the floor for comments. I see EU again. You have the floor.
because again, I'm not EU, I'm the co-chair of the contact group, so I'm always a bit confused. So sorry about this. And sorry to intervene again, but I would really like to remind, the parties that we spent 6 hours in 2 sessions of the contact group to discuss only a few paragraphs of this text. And we believe, Jorge and I believe, we made substantial progress. So I would really plead to ask you to refrain from modifying again these paragraphs and please focus on the paragraphs where we haven't had time to discuss. So that's my plea, because I feel a bit like, why did we spend 6 hours of hard work if it's to reopen everything now. So sorry for this, but just a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and your comment is well taken by everybody. Let's keep making progress. Now I have Sweden. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can you indicate that we are on para 7 now?
I was to call for comments on paragraph 7, so
Okay.
please go ahead.
Thank you. And apologies to the co-chair of the contact group. It's our understanding that we haven't discussed para 7. That's why we take the floor now. And we would like to propose to remove the words adapt and in the beginning of the paragraph. We think we should really stick to the concept that we're talking about a global monitoring framework for a global biodiversity framework, and that it should not be up to the parties to adapt component and complementary indicators, since the para is clearly indicating that the use is voluntary, and that it can be used according to national priorities and circumstances. So those parties who decide to use the proposed component and complementary indicators should use the same and not adapt them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's put in brackets adapt. And all right, I see no more requests from the floor for paragraph 7. So I open the floor for comments on paragraph 8. Uganda, followed by South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 8, we seem to have a concern about the word recognizes. If we retain that word, this paragraph does not seem to impose any obligation on the parties to take any action beyond just noting that COP15 simply recognizes the value of their proposed alignment. And so in its current framing, this paragraph is very passive in intent and also, I think, in ambition, and needs to be amended to make it more action-oriented. And so we would like to consider the following framing. So instead of the word recognizes the value of aligning, would like to replace those words, further invites parties to align, and then the text continues. If I can go through it again one more time, Chair. Delete the words or put in brackets the words recognizes the value of aligning, replace them with further invites parties to align. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the paragraph would say to recognize the value of aligning, national monitoring, and so on. Thank you very much. I invite you to move as quick as possible, and mainly on paragraphs that are clean, of course, if we're not revised before is fully open, but those paragraphs that were part of the work of the contact group, please bear in mind that was a lot of work there. So let's now. I see Argentina asking for the floor. You have the floor, Argentina.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. And in line with what Uganda has just said, and to mean consistency with the previous paragraph, we think that paragraph 8 should finish with, as appropriate and according to their national priorities and circumstances. Because here we're being invited to use different types of monitoring and statistics. And in both cases, we believe we need to have the same considerations applied to these two invitations. Yes, so we'll apply the same criterion to this paragraph also. Thank you.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my apologies. I raised my hand much earlier because we also had a comment with regard to paragraph 6. It's just that I had some connection problems. We wanted to introduce text after NBSEPs, which reads, or programs for the conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. This is in line with Article 6 of the convention where NBSEPs emanate from. And with regard to paragraph 7,
South Africa, can you repeat your insertion?
We want to propose the movement of the last part of this paragraph as appropriate and according to national priorities and circumstances to the second line after national planning processes.
South Africa, can you repeat your first insertion after NBSAPs? Can you repeat your suggestion?
Sorry.
I hope you can hear me. Secretary, do you hear me? Okay, I see you noting. So seems South Africa is not listening. But did you capture, Secretary, the insertions from South Africa? Can you, after NBSAPs or programs for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and then again the same criteria at the end as appropriate and according to the national priorities and circumstances. I hope that reflects the suggestion from South Africa. Noted, is included. And now I ask for comments on paragraph 9. I see no Belgium.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In this paragraph, we would like to delete the last words that are related to pursuant to Article 20, because we think this is not relevant in this paragraph, as this paragraph talks about the IPBES and the BIP, which do not depend on the CBD and this do not depend on its articles. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium. So we include brackets there. Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. For us, this is a very important paragraph. And we think we could strengthen the language, and instead of starting with encourages, we could say urges parties. And to cover the concern from Belgium, I believe, the pursuant to Article 20 could be moved to the start of the paragraph just after parties, urges parties pursuant to Article 20, and then continue and invites other governments, etc., to support national, regional and global biodiversity monitoring systems. So basically, we'd move pursuant to Article 20 up to just next to parties in the first line. Thank you.
And move parties in brackets. And at the end, the text is deleted since it's moved to the first part of the paragraph. Thank you very much, Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and sorry for the dog in my previous intervention. We would like to delete the wording other relevant organizations and not delete other relevant organizations, but to add after other relevant organizations invited to be part of the technical expert group on indicators. We believe that it's important to keep consistency between this decision and the process that will be undertaken by the technical group of experts on indicators. So we would like to ensure that these other relevant organizations are those participating in this group. Maybe I can read it again.
Por favor.
Okay, so after other relevant organizations, we would like to include invited to be part of the technical expert group on indicators.
So it would read, or your parties pursue Article 20 and invites other governments, is inviting governments, the GEF, BIP, IBES, and other relevant organizations, again, invited to be part of technical expert group of indicators, or it would say, and other relevant organizations invited, okay, to support national, regional, and global biodiversity. I see your point to consider those that we're going to invite to be part of the group, but in some way, this is limiting to the opportunity for more organizations, more relevant to be part of it, just for you to be aware of this with your suggestions. Seems in some way you are ensuring these organizations to be part, but you are also limiting to them. Eso me confunde un poquito. Yo creo que lo que queremos es...
So this is confusing a little bit.
However, we also see that maybe some indicators may have multiple methodologies that may generate more confusion than help. So this is why we want to keep consistency with the composition of the group of experts. So we would like to ask you to please keep the text.
Está bien.
That's fine. So the text stands as you requested between square brackets. So, and those invited be part of technical expert group and indicators. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. And I know that it's very early, so my dogs are still asleep in Mexico.
Sweden, asking for the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to keep that proposal by Colombia in brackets, and in line with your suggestion, we think it's not about the review of the monitoring framework, it's really about supporting the overall implementation on national, regional and global monitoring systems, and we want the opportunity to invite more organizations than just those experts we explicitly invite to the ARTEC for the review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I open the floor on the next paragraph, on paragraph 10. Canada.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a very small addition for paragraph 10. We note that we would find it helpful to include IPBES, even though the paragraph refers to other relevant organizations. Given the scope and the importance of the work that IPBES is doing, we would find it helpful to list it here specifically in paragraph 10.
So what is the comment again?
Sorry, so we could add IPBES after, for example, the Biodiversity Observation Network and before the Biodiversity Indicators Partnership, just to make specific reference to IPBES in this paragraph, please. Okay. If possible.
So we include IPBES after the Biodiversity Observation Network. Thank you very much. I hope we don't need to have it in brackets, but we are consistent. Now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 11. I would like to remind you that this paragraph was extensively discussed by the contact group. So my invitation is to not to touch it and to move to adopt it as the outcome and to move to paragraph 12. I open the floor for comments on paragraph 12. UK.
Thank Thank you, Chair. Not on paragraph 12, but earlier we mentioned an additional paragraph 11 bis, which referred to discussion on paragraph 3.
Go ahead.
Could I?
Yes, please.
11 bis would read, requests Substa to review outcomes of the RTEG. Sorry, this is in an abbreviated form, and complete the scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework and report their findings for subsequent consideration of SBI and the Conference of the Parties at its 16th meeting.
Can you repeat again to capture properly?
Requests Substa to review outcomes of the RTEG and complete the scientific and technical review of the monitoring framework and report their findings for subsequent consideration of SBI and the Conference of the Parties at its 16th meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, UK. I see very pertinent the inclusion of this paragraph because finally it's talking about our body, our substance, to, of course, see the outcomes of the ATEC, which, in terms of reference, we will review shortly, and to ensure that these outcomes are revised and then to present to next COP our work on this matter on the monitoring framework. Thank you very much for the suggestion. Now this makes clarity and consistency between what the COP is asking, and this is the mandate for Substa to do its job. Thank you very much. Belgium is asking for the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yeah, this went a little fast, and it's on paragraph 11. We are very sorry to ask for a small addition in this paragraph, but it's on an addition that has nothing to do with scientific or technical review. It has budget implications. So we would like to add, after ad hoc technical expert group, subject to the availability of resources. It can be in brackets until COP. We have no problems with that, but we would like to have this addition in it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Belgium, I ask cooperation for everybody for this paragraph that was really extensively discussed by the contact group, so you will have the opportunity to do it when we revise the L version. Just to have consistency, because we can have the same situation in further paragraphs. So I ask you for your flexibility on this. I ask to respect the work of the contact group so we can move on. Otherwise, it's going to be more insertions, and I prefer not to touch it and to ask for your flexibility. You will have the opportunity to include it on the L document. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Now I open the floor on comments on paragraph 12. I see no request from the floor for paragraph 12. Now I open the floor on paragraph 13. I see no comments on paragraph 13, which is in brackets. I give Colombia followed by Portugal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We remember that at the very end of our last meeting of the contact group, I think it was Brazil who proposed this paragraph, but we didn't have the chance to understand what was the purpose of, or the spirit behind this text. And we asked to keep it in brackets because it was quite confusing. So maybe, I don't know if we can have a little bit of the discussion in order to understand better what they want to do with this text. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colombia. I invite Argentina to give us an explanation on the nature of this paragraph, to see the understanding that we're going to be working with the ATEC, and usually, as you know, all documents for Substa, most documents pass through the process of peer review in order to enhance quality, the technical and scientific quality of documents, or at least it has been the practice. So I would like to invite Argentina, who is a proponent of this paragraph.
Here, I think it was Brazil.
No fue mi delegación la que hizo esta propuesta, así que
Was not my delegation that proposed this.
La palabra.
Sorry, it's Brazil that has the floor, not Argentina, on this proposal. They were the proponent.
Yes, Senor Presidente. As regarding this proposal, I guess that given the fact that SBSTA will be considering the outcomes of the ATAG, we think that it will not be necessary this process of a peer review, so we would be willing to delete this proposal. But we would suggest keeping the proposal on online discussions, given that we have very positive discussions on other topics of SBSTA, such as synthetic biology. Then we would suggest changing the beginning of paragraph 13 to request the executive secretary, subject to the availability of resources, to convene moderated online discussions under an open-ended online forum. And then paragraph 13 would stop there. Thank you, Mr. Chair, I think.
Thank you, Brazil. So the paragraph then will says, request the executive secretary, subject to the availability of financial resources, to convene a moderate online discussions under the open-ended online forum. Moderate online discussions. It's like repetitive, so maybe can Secretariat help me? How the new formulation, the new short version of paragraph 13?
I think we could end the discussion. So request the executive secretary, subject to the availability of resources, to convene moderated online discussions. Mm-hmm. Perhaps we also keep on the monitoring framework, just to be clear, even though it wasn't in Brazil's statement, and then it would end.
Thank you very much. I think this is a intention. I hope this is acceptable to Brazil. Now we have a shorter version of this paragraph. Now we give the floor to Portugal.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We also had the concerns raised by Colombia on this para, but now with this suggestion by Brazil, we can agree with that. But we think the ATAG should be involved in this, the organization of the online discussions. So we would suggest to add after executive secretary in collaboration with the ATAG. Thank you.
Very well. Now I would like to ask you if with this formulation that says, request the executive secretary in collaboration with the ATAG and subject to the availability of resources to convene a moderate online discussion, discussions on the monitoring framework. If this is acceptable, can we delete the brackets on paragraph 13? I see no objections or requests for the floor on paragraph 13. I'm happy to have a clean text in a paragraph. And now let's move to paragraph 14. Oh, I see Sweden.
Sorry, Chair. We agree to clean this paragraph. We have a proposal for a new paragraph 14.
So you have a proposal for a new paragraph 14?
Yes.
Can this be, well, this is two paragraphs. Should it be before or can we analyze 14 and then to see your new paragraph afterwards?
I think it should go before 14 in line with 12 and 13. It would be more consistent, but I'm open for your advice.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead with you.
Okay, thank you. The reason to propose this new paragraph is that we would like to strengthen the cooperation of the work under the working group 8J and the development of the monitoring framework. And we would like to link those two processes better together. And our proposal for a new para 14, and we are open to your advice to place that para after 14 if you think it's better there, is, and I read at dictation speed and could copy it in the chat with your permission, request the working group on Article 8J and related provisions to continue the development of and operationalization of indicators related to traditional knowledge and indigenous peoples and local communities, and report on this work to the parties and for the Secretariat to make information available on progress and outcomes to the RTEC and in square brackets and other relevant working groups. And we can have this whole paragraph in brackets, since we note that 8J is still under discussion at COP, but we would like to add this at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will ask Secretary to read a new formulation in brackets.
Requests the working group on Article 8J and related provisions to continue the development and operationalization of the monitoring framework. Now I get a little confused. I think we want to say in the context of IPLCs, but I missed that part, and report on this work to parties and for the Secretariat to report progress to other relevant working groups. That's our understanding. I apologize.
Yes, I'd like to be sure that we have the right language.
I think we need, if he could read it out one more time, that would be helpful to make sure that we have it correct.
So please, can you repeat your insertion so Secretariat can have the full text? Judith?
Thank you, Chair. I copied the text in the chat and I can read it out again. Requests the working group on Article 8J and related provisions to continue the development of and operationalization of indicators related to traditional knowledge and indigenous peoples and local communities, and report on this work to the parties and for the Secretariat to make information available on progress and outcomes to the RTEC and in brackets and other relevant working groups.
Okay, thank you very much. So with this, now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 14 to finish the main body of this, and then we need to move for the annex. We have a little bit more than 15 minutes. I hope we can make it. So comments on paragraph 14, A and B. I see Norway, followed by Canada and Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small amendment in 14A. It is our view not the role of the Secretariat to perform capacity building activities, but rather to provide guidance. Therefore, we'd like to delete our bracket in the first sentence and support and add on, so that the sentence reads to develop guidance on capacity development to support parties, and then continues on.
Thank you, Norway. Canada, followed by Argentina.
Thank you very much, Chair. We had a similar, or maybe contributing comment to Norway in, rather than the word in 14A to develop guidance, instead of develop, to make available guidance. So replace the word develop with make available. There may be many sources of guidance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We include available. Thank you so much. Argentina, followed by Belgium.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. In our case, we think it's important to put between brackets the expression development that comes after capacity and include building. We would prefer to replace it because in Article 22 of the Cartagena Protocol and also under the Nagoya Protocol, there are specific references to capacity building. However, we know there's a discussion that's pending in the SBI on this term. So for the moment, we could live with keeping both expressions between square brackets for the moment. I would like to add after capacity building and technology transfer, because as we know, in order to be able to implement this ambitious monitoring framework, it won't just be necessary to have capacity building, but also technology transfer to developing countries so that we'll be able to move ahead with this. Thank you very much. So you want to have capacity building and technology transfer instead of capacity development. Yes, that's it. Thank you very much, Argentina.
And I hope we can move to the annex. We have only 15 minutes before the break.
Ma main est abaissée.
Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Regarding this paragraph, in the chapeau, we would like to add, after request, the Executive Secretary, subject to the availability of resources. And then in little a, we have the same concerns than previous speakers, and we think the common language used for such request is to so little a would read, to facilitate the development of guidance, and we would also delete support and then have capacity development. We can have both at this moment, as we know there are discussions ongoing, development and building both in brackets, and that would be it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Finally, Colombia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to support Argentina's proposals, and we would also like to include a text after what they proposed on capacity building and technology transfer that would read to support parties to implement the monitoring framework. And then when it reads in compiling, in the fourth line, we would like to modify and in compiling and using. And we would also like to request the deletion of the text after developing countries, in particular the least developed countries, small island developing states, and countries with economies in transition. We would like to delete that part. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Colombia. So with this, I see no more requests from the floor from paragraph 14. With this, we finish with the main body, and we will work on the terms of reference with the annex. I'll start with paragraph 1, reminding and inviting, since this paragraph was extensively discussed by the contact group, not to touch it anymore. So we will apply the same criteria. Now I open for comments on paragraph B from the annex. I see no request from the floor for paragraph 1B. I have Belgium. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and sorry for taking the floor again. Here in paragraph B, we think the word prioritizing could be misinterpreted. We don't want to rank the different headlines indicators among themselves, but first work on the on those indicators, and this we would just prefer to use the words instead of prioritizing, especially for and in the implementation and so on. And actually, this would also apply to paragraph A, but I'm not sure we could ask this at this stage.
No, what I'm B. So, okay, to replace especially for instead of prioritizing. That sounds reasonable. Thank you very much. We don't need to put brackets here. Makes sense. And then Norway.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to keep the prioritize. The way we read this text is to say that we are prioritizing first work on the headline indicators before we move on to the rest of the indicators. So that's a reading of the para. So I'd like to keep it as it is. Thanks.
Can then ask Belgium if we can keep prioritizing and to move on. I mean, we don't need to put brackets in this part. I mean, it's clear that, of course, headline indicators has a special place. So I would like to ask for any of you some flexibility and to use one word and not to put more brackets. Meanwhile, I'll give the floor to Mexico, followed by Sweden.
Thank you, Chair. Mexico would like to support Norway in keeping prioritizing, but perhaps what we could do is instead of prioritizing, it would be giving priority to headline indicators. And in this way, we are making sure that first we are going to review the headline indicators. So I think it makes clear that we are not going to prioritize among the headline indicators, but give priority to. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if it makes the text clearer. Thank you.
Gracias, Mexico.
Thank you very much, Mexico.
Also, when Mexico can be acceptable, I mean, we will work with headline indicators. So giving priority to headline indicators. If that is acceptable for Belgium, and if Belgium can just put it on the chat, we can move on. Sweden, I saw the chat you support Belgium.
Yes, that is the case on that formulation, but they're moving really fast and there were a lot of issues in brackets. I would like to add that we would like to put square brackets around according to criteria identified in the annex of the document CBD, which is not identified. We had not a lot of time to discuss the criteria in the contact group. The chair's text on that issue is quite short, and I think there will be further development. For that reason, we would like to bracket that part, since we don't think that is needed here. Thank you.
Sorry, but I'm a little bit lost.
Para A, 1A?
1A. No, the agreement is not to touch 1A, because it's the outcome of the contact group. So we can do that in the L when we have an L document.
All right.
Right? So for this, the formulation of Mexico by it would say giving priority to headline indicators. I'm wondering if that is acceptable for Belgium, Norway, and then we can have a clean text on paragraph 1B. Belgium, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. On this, well, if we could have the advice of a native English speaker to be reassured about this, because both ways, either prioritizing or giving priority to headline indicators, for us could be understood as ranking them within the group of headline indicators. And this is not what we want. So, and this is not the mandate of ANATEC either.
Okay, since there is no agreement, we will keep both expressions in bracket and move on. Now I ask for comments on 1C. We have 7 minutes before the break. I hope we can complete our deliberations, because we need to open also the first reading on invasive species. Otherwise, we will not have CRP document for the next set of plenaries in June. I hope you understand my concerns. I see the co-chair Ann Teller asking for the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And here again, I want to insist that the technical annex, was really discussed extensively in the contact group. We have 7 minutes left. And if in 7 minutes parties believe they can sort it out, the different brackets, then I guess I was completely useless, because I didn't manage in the contact group. So I would suggest that to agree on the annex as a package instead of paragraph per paragraph as it was discussed in the contact group, because as you said repeatedly, Mr. Chair, this will be rediscussed again, and so it's not the end of it, and there will be editorial proofing, language proofing, and so on. So that's my request. I'm sorry to intervene again, but I feel a bit not respected in a way. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Anne, and I appreciate your work you and Jorge did. And this applies in particular for paragraph 6 and 7. You extensively discussed with the contact group on this point, so my plea is not to touch paragraph 6 or 7, which is the result of long deliberations. And it seems we have very little time. I would like to support the proposal of the co-chair if we can keep the whole package of the terms of reference for the ad hoc technical expert group of indicators to work to do the job. And of course, the outcomes will be revised by Substa again, and then Substa will submit to the COP the revised version of the framework. So I would like to submit as a package the terms of reference, to co-chairs, the Substa chair, also to participate and start working as soon as possible. I hope this is acceptable given the time, and there will be no need to work more on this point. I give the floor to Argentina and Samoa. We have 4 minutes.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. And we share with what has been said by the co-chairs. We've worked on this a great deal and we don't have time to develop it more. But having said that, and given that the monitoring framework is something that will have to be worked on by the ATEC, has not yet been developed, and we want it to be made clear that we have to revisit these terms of reference once the ATEC has been set up. I think it's important to put the whole of the annex in square brackets to show that it's going to be revised once we've actually got the monitoring framework established. Thank you, Argentina. I'd like to recall that all of this document will be available as an L document. We have the physical meeting and we will have an opportunity to review it then. So on the understanding that the whole of the annex is in square brackets, and that it will come back as an L document, I propose that it should be adopted. Samoa, would you like to intervene? You have the floor, Samoa.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, go ahead, Samoa.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We would like to make a comment in paragraph 3 of the terms of reference. And Samoa is speaking on behalf of Samoa and the Federated States of Micronesia.
Samoa, my suggestion is to adopt, to pass the whole annex in brackets to be included for the L document. So the idea is, since we have very little time, is to keep it as a package as it is. So that's why I'm not going to the different paragraphs to have specific comments. You will have the opportunity to do when we see this document on an L format in the next opportunity when in the face-to-face meeting. So my invitation is not to add more text. That was what I asked to everybody. So I hope you can understand and help us and proceed to use the whole annex in brackets.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your flexibility and support. So with this, we can proceed with the annex. So I will ask Secretariat to prepare this CRP document. It's adopted with all these changes and to present as an L document. I thank you very much to everybody for cooperation. I also didn't have the opportunity due to time to give the floor to observers. I do apologize, but I know you've been very active also in communication with delegations. And so I will ask, I invite you to take a 15 minutes break and to be ready to proceed with the next agenda item on invasive alien species. I think we all deserve a good cup of coffee in the next 15 minutes. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Welcome again. We will proceed now with agenda item 10 on invasive alien species for completion of the first reading. Kindly recall that this item was considered during the sixth segment of our informal session on February 26. At that time, interventions were heard from 26 parties, with 2 additional parties having submitted undelivered written submissions to regional groups. Written submissions were received from 7 organizations. I'll give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce item 10 for completion of the first reading. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On item 10, the Secretariat has prepared document CBD/Substa/24/10, invasive alien species, pursuant to decision 14/11. The document contains a report on the progress on classification and labeling on the consignment of living organisms and has 5 annexes. The Secretariat has also issued the core agendum document CBD/Substa/24/10/Core1 to correct paragraph 7 of Annex 1 in document Substa/24/10. The subsidiary body will be invited to consider the annexes and provide advice and recommendations to the Conference of the Parties at its 15th meeting as appropriate. In addition, the Secretariat has before it 3 information documents that you can see on your screen related to this agenda item. Please note that the Secretariat will take into account all interventions made at the informal session, in addition to the interventions made during this formal session today, in the preparation of the CRP or non-paper of this agenda item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for this quick introduction. I do remind you to all participants that if you already delivered a statement on this point, and you want to take the floor, is only if you would like to add something to your previous intervention during the informal session, and to provide them in writing 12 hours, within 12 hours from the closure of this. For minor changes, you simply may resubmit your statement. You know, we are now familiar with the procedure, so I'd like to move on and to give the floor by parties and statements by other governments, stakeholder groups, and other observers will also be heard as time allows. And also, after this point, I would like later to make specific comments on a different topic, on the emerging issues, so we will need some time to make a very efficient use of time on the 1 hour and 12 minutes we made. Now I open the floor for interventions from regions. I understand, sorry, there will be no regional statements, well, for some regions. So I open the floor for regional statements. I see Morocco speaking on behalf of the African region. You have the floor. No? I see France. No, Morocco, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. What I heard was that there will be no regional statements, because I will be speaking on behalf of Morocco. Is that what you said, in fact? Can't hear you, sir.
Asking for regional statements.
Right.
So let's wait a little bit, Morocco, please. I see no requests for regional statements. Then I open now the floor for parties. So I give the floor to Morocco, followed by Finland and Sweden.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Morocco takes note of all the Secretariat documents, as well as the guidelines based on the work of the ATEG on invasive alien species. Morocco Also notes the advice and additional guidance concerning application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, management of specific incursion vectors, as well as various other points regarding the delicate subject of IAS. Firstly, there is a large volume of additional guidance, and it would certainly be helpful to have the guidance simplified and supported with case studies and examples of best practices in order to allow effective mainstreaming at the national level. Secondly, Morocco believes it important to put greater emphasis in the draft recommendation to COP15 on the need for capacity building for national institutions in charge of these activities. This is to ensure that they have means of identifying invasive alien species, preventing their introduction, eradicating, and effectively managing those that have already been introduced, and continuing to develop an updated and appropriate legal arsenal in this area. Thirdly, regarding border controls on the transfer of invasive alien species, it is important to pursue efforts to harmonize labeling at the international level for transborder shipments of living species that could have potentially dangerous consequences for biodiversity and the environment in general. This also involves training for border service officers and capacity building for the border services themselves, particularly within customs and forestry administrations. This also applies to those responsible for the protection of plants and animal health. Fourthly, enforcement of border controls, together with those taken at a national level under CITES or similar instruments, would make it possible to achieve an undeniable synergetic effect. And fifthly, public awareness raising on the dangers, economic, environmental, and sanitary dangers of invasive species remains an action of utmost importance to be put in place. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Morocco. Let me tell you that I have a long list of speakers. I invite you to focus on recommendations so Secretary can take note and we can prepare a CRP document. Let's try to stay to the time. I'll give the floor to France, followed by Sweden and Indonesia. France, you have the floor. France, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. France warmly welcomes the proposals of the technical group, which we congratulate on its work. We hope that a version very close to the one proposed will be adopted at COP15. In addition to our intervention at the informal session of SBSTA, we would like to propose the two following modifications, which we will provide in writing to the Secretariat. The first modification can be found in Annex 2, paragraph 13, on good practices for monitoring and compliance. We believe that in this paragraph, two problems with very distinct levels of feasibility are mixed. On the one hand, general aspects on the need to disseminate good practices, and on the other hand, the recommendations to use non-intrusive inspection technologies that are not really available or calibrated to detect invasive alien species. We propose clarifying the following wording. The proposed text will be sent to the Secretariat. In Annex 7, paragraph 27, in Annex 5, paragraph 27A, we wish to add reference to the use of non-intrusive inspection technologies. In paragraph 27A, after taxonomically identifying organisms, we would like to add, including identification keys based on morphology and links to databases with images and to lists of specialists, comma, and then continuing as per the text, DNA barcoding, artificial intelligence-aided identification, and citizen science. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, France. Now I give the floor to Sweden, followed by Indonesia and Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sweden refers to our statement given at the informal session of SBSTA and propose an additional recommendation. We are concerned by the short time scheduled at SBSTA for discussing important invasive alien species issues, such as the elements of guidance in the annexes of the SBSTA recommendation. IG Target 9 on invasive alien species is one of the few targets that is on its way to being met. This success is directly due to the CBD's pioneering work in developing guidance, enabling cooperation and data and information exchange, raising awareness, and encouraging research on invasive alien species. However, despite these successes, invasive alien species continue to spread and wreak havoc on biological diversity in all ecosystems. Now is not the time for the CBD to reduce the momentum of its work with invasive alien species. Yes, here at SBSTA-24, we must prioritize the work directly leading to the open-ended working group. But we must acknowledge that the outcomes of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will depend upon the success of advancing work within the CBD with all of the major drivers affecting biodiversity, as reflected in CBD's work with invasive alien species. We cannot step back at this critical time. We reiterate our position that releasing the elements of guidance in the SBSTA document on invasive alien species without revision would be counterproductive and lead to many misunderstandings. However, they also provide much scientific and technical information that is valuable for decision makers and environmentalists in their efforts to protect biodiversity from the impacts of invasive alien species. In the event it is not possible to revise the elements of guidance at SBSTA-24, we therefore submit a recommendation requesting the Executive Secretary to convene an informal expert meeting to revise the elements of guidance on invasive alien species contained in the annexes of the CBD document, SBSTA document, and present the results to SBSTA before COP16. We provide our proposal in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sweden. Appreciate it. I'll give the floor to Indonesia, followed by Argentina and Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. On this agenda item, aligning ourselves on the crux of the issue, Indonesia calls for greater global effort and solid dedication to increase awareness and understanding of the negative impacts and implications of invasive alien species to biodiversity, to enhance international cooperation on planning, monitoring, and data exchange on invasive alien species, specifically to establish early detection and rapid response system. It is also important to enhance capacity on the management of IAS and harmonize multi-criteria decision-making approaches to address gaps in risk assessment methodology, such as through prevention, management, and control of IAS by relevant countries. Chair, regarding the document, Indonesia would like to propose as follows. Paragraph 1D, to add the word ecology after the introduction of invasive alien species on and so on. Therefore, the sentence will be the introduction of invasive alien species on ecology, social, economic, and cultural values. Accordingly, in paragraph 12.4.2a, to add also the word ecology after the introduction of invasive alien species. Therefore, the sentence will be the introduction of invasive alien species on ecology, social, economic, and cultural values. Lastly, in this opportunity, Indonesia would like to seek further clarification from ACTEC on the definition of cross-border e-commerce in live organism as written on paragraph 12.4.2b, whether the first refers to geographical border or administrative border. Terima kasih. I thank you, Chair.
Terima kasih, Yeah. Now I'll give the floor to Argentina, followed by Brazil and Finland. Argentina tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Argentina believes that it's very important to manage invasive alien species and their negative effects on biodiversity. On this matter, we are suggesting modifications to the draft recommendation that are additional to what we said in the informal session, and we have 4 points here. First of all, the documentation deals with many questions related to trade, which is recognised as one of the potential entry points for IAS. So we suggest that we reinforce the consistency of the obligations derived from other multilateral agreements, introducing references to the WTO agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and also aspects related to e-commerce covered in GATT. Secondly, we recognise the need to include cultural values in the multi-criteria assessments that have been mentioned. To avoid possible customs barriers, we suggest that we should mention that these should be carried out in accordance with clear and transparent procedures that are based on science and risk analyses. Thirdly, Argentina appreciates collaboration with a subcommittee of experts on the transport of dangerous goods and on globally harmonised labelling. Notwithstanding this, we consider that submitting a proposal to the subcommittee goes beyond the request made by COP in decision 14/11 in subparagraph 13A, where it requested exploring possibilities to develop this type of labelling. Thus, we suggest that any development of a proposal should be submitted to future consideration in a future meeting of Substab before it's submitted to the subcommittee. Fourthly, Argentina considers that we should take note of the guidance contained in the annexes. This is a useful tool to be implemented in accordance with national priorities and circumstances. We suggest that we should include this clarification in various sections, as well also in relation to other international agreements where it's recommended that the parties should adhere to these international agreements. The need to sign new treaties is part of a sovereign decision, and we have to consider that countries may carry out an effective control of invasive alien species without actually being dependent on the international instruments that they may have ratified. So, Chair, we would like to say that we are available to work constructively on this agenda item. Thank you very much, Argentina, and now Brazil, and then Finland, followed by Colombia. Brazil now, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, I'd like to really appreciate the leadership that you're showing. Thank you very much for that.
Takes note of document SBSTTA-24. We take this opportunity to express our appreciation for the work of the experts that took part in the ATAG on invasive alien species. We are also grateful for the support provided by the Secretariat and for the work conducted with the Secretariat of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, for the World Customs Organization, and the Interagency Liaison Group on Invasive Alien Species on the possibility of developing a system of classification and label. Although not entirely convinced on the need of this exercise, Brazil has engaged constructively in the last COP and agreed to the decision 1411, paying respect for the interests and concerns of other parties, as Brazil always does. However, we regret that the approach adopted to this topic went beyond the decision and the CBD mandate. We recall that the decision 1411, in its paragraph 13A, underlines that all measures under consideration should be consistent and in harmony with international agreements, as well as in line with international standards. We highlight that the consideration of labeling is an area extensively regulated by GATT, and we were therefore surprised not to see representatives of the WTO taking part of the ATAG meetings. We were also puzzled by the fact that the 2019 meeting of the Interagency Liaison Group on Invasive Species also did not involve any WTO expert. Due to the limited consideration given to this topic, Brazil would prefer not to continue this exercise. Hence, we cannot agree to a recommendation to the Executive Secretary to submit proposals on labeling. We recall obligations and agreements in other treaties and conventions and would recommend caution when addressing cultural values in the context of risk analysis. Since cultural values are not recognized as a valid criteria by either the International Plant Protection Convention or the World Organization for Animal Health. Moreover, WTO's SPS agreements, for example, especially discourage measures that are not based on science or align with international standards, guidelines, and recommendations developed by the Codex Alimentarius, IPPC, and OIE. Regarding the annex, Brazil does not endorse them because we understand they are a compilation of broad considerations on invasive species. However, we have some comments that we will submit in written. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Brazil. Now I give the floor to Finland, followed by Colombia and Malaysia. Finland, you have the floor. Microphone to Finland, please. Can you raise your hand, Finland? We can't hear you. Yes. Go ahead, Finland.
Mr. Chair, we would like to draw your attention to the following. In addition to the Finnish intervention in February, Finland considers that the content of all annexes would still need revision before they are acceptable. We would like to highlight that, for example, much of the advice and technical guidance in the annexes have been negotiated earlier and are already included in COP decisions. It needs to be clarified in the document that earlier COP decisions are directly relevant to the issue of invasive alien species e-commerce and other issues included in the document. We have modified the suggested recommendations and all annexes accordingly. There are also several other amendments and clarifications which we suggest to the annexes. We think that including important elements of the AHTEC report is essential. Recognizing the time limits for SBSTTA-24 for revising the annexes, Finland would suggest the following. We may retain all the annexes, but in each annex we should refer directly to the AHTEC report itself. Also, the earlier COP decisions should be referred accordingly. We are also open for any other proposal for moving forward and to get the adoption as soon as possible. Chair, we have uploaded our statement and suggested amendments to the CBD webpage to be publicly available. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Finland. Now we'll give the floor to Colombia, followed by Malaysia and España. Colombia tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The floor.
We thank the Secretary and the Technical Expert Group for drafting the document SBSTTA-24/10 and its annexes. And we have the following general comments. First, special relevance must be given to the effects and impacts generated on human health by invasive alien species. Therefore, we support the consideration included in the document with respect to human health. It is important to highlight in Annex 1 the need to strengthen knowledge management and research on the impacts generated by these species, to identify the environmental liabilities and to generate a strategy with productive sectors which promote large-scale activities with these species under a co-responsibility approach. We also suggest in Annex 1 to deepen the analysis and replication of good practices developed by parties and other relevant stakeholders that have been implemented in this matter. Annex 2 leaves aside the effects of illegal traffic and commercialization, as well as the different access routes which continue to be problems that should be addressed in order to tackle the impact caused by live organisms in cross-border e-commerce. In Annex 4, it is important to consider the strengthening of national databases to fit global databases, and to include information from several knowledge systems regarding invasive alien species. It is worth noting that although this issue is extremely important, the budgetary allocations are very limited, which is why the incremental cost of implementing the management measures suggested by the expert group will require the mobilization of resources from all sources. In this slide, Mr. Chair, we have the following 4 text proposals for the draft decision. First, in paragraph 2A, include the word environmental after the word economic. Second, include a new paragraph 5, which reads, encourages the Global Environmental Facility, donor countries and other relevant organizations, including from the private sector, to provide with resources, especially developing countries, for the implementation of the technical guidance contained in the Annexes 1 to 5. Third, in the title of Annex 1, include the word environmental after the word economic. And fourth, in the Annex 1, paragraph 1, include the wording comprehensive management after the word control. Other specific text proposals will be submitted in writing. Thank you, Gracias, señor presidente.
Muchas gracias, Colombia.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to Colombia.
Go straight to your recommendations. Sometimes you give a lot of preamble and rationale, but what is the most important at the end is to see your specific amendments to the recommendations in order to make more efficient use of our very limited time. I give the floor to Malaysia, followed by España and Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, Malaysia recognizes invasive alien species as a grave and imminent threat to local biodiversity. This recognition has led to the creation of the National Invasive Alien Species Action Plan 2021 to 2025. It is a tragedy that many species that have been introduced in the past for economic reasons have proceeded to cause stress to our natural environment. In light of this, Malaysia calls for more technical guidance on various aspects of IAS, including, but not limited to, risk assessments, control and eradication methods, effects of climate change, land use change, and land degradation on the exacerbation of IAS. It is often the case that IAS poses the most threat to developing countries that are biodiversity rich. Hence, Malaysia urges that capacity building and sharing of knowledge between experts to be prioritized, as it is foreseen to initiate greater impact in the development of early warning systems for IAS. Mr. Chair, the current guidance document is a good initial step, but Malaysia would like to highlight the need for implementation enablers that can include workshops, webinars, and knowledge sharing platforms. Malaysia shares the concern that IAS effects are wide-ranging and across various sectors, including security, health, agriculture, fisheries, and forestry. Hence, and finally, the work on IAS is of priority to Malaysia, tackling the issue through a multi-agency approach. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Malaysia. Now I give the floor to España, seguido de Chile and Uganda.
Spain, then Chile and Uganda. Or rather, Spain, then Japan and Chile. Spain, you have the floor. Can you hear me, Chair? Yes, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair. Spain reiterates its statement that it made in the Substa informal sessions. Turning to the draft recommendation and its annexes, we wish to underscore once again the key importance of sectorial mainstreaming of biodiversity, and in this case with a view to appropriately addressing the prevention and management of invasive alien species. Therefore, we especially welcome the proposed guidance related to tourism, air transport, as well as the international aid programs, capacity building activities, or water transfers and navigational canals. And we will submit comments in writing with specific amendments on this item. Thank you very much.
Gracias, España.
Thank you to Spain there. And now I give the floor to Japan, then Chile and Uganda. Japan first.
Microphone to Japan, please. Seems there are some technical problems with Japan. Meanwhile, we can proceed with Chile. Chile tiene la palabra.
Have the floor, Chile. Good day, Chair. Can you hear me? Perfect. Chair, delegates, welcome to everyone from Chile. Invasive alien species are one of the major drivers of biodiversity loss at a global level, and for Chile, as a country with high rates of endemism, we are in a similar situation. We wish to highlight the importance of measures to prevent the entry of IAS, known as biosafety, but also believe that it's important to make possible an early warning system between countries for the purpose of informing and interconnecting preventive measures between countries that share borders, but also with those who are collaborating on trade and tourism-related actions. We think that improved communication could avoid new invasions and thus prevent damage to biodiversity, health, culture, our heritage and parties' economies. The documents that have been analysed meet the expectations, are in line with the efforts that Chile may start to undertake or continue to make to prevent and mitigate the impacts of IAS. However, we believe that it is necessary, in particular for the aquatic and marine context, to further urge parties to propose agreements and generate information on mechanisms to prevent, manage and reduce its impacts. We wish to emphasise once again, as we've done for other subjects, the importance of cooperation and support between contracting parties as regards new technological developments to improve biosafety or the detection of species at the border, as well as the management of terrestrial, marine and aquatic exotic species, as well as making progress on a larger scale management across territories with one or more parties, as well as taking account of risks to be considered when implementing these measures. Thus, we suggest the development of collaboration and transfer knowledge bodies or mechanisms that support sharing of progress on the topic of bio-invasions with other parties. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Chile. Let's try again with Japan. Japan, please.
Hello.
We can hear you, Japan. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We believe that the international community, the CBD and beyond, needs to enhance cooperation with further inclusive approach to the transportation of sea containers, which continue and expand the unintentional introduction of invasive alien species. The non-biological invasion risk of small alien species attached to the cargo is growing issues. We believe that the management of sea containers should be indicated in the recommendation of SBSTTA-24 and in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework as well. Chair, please note that consignment contaminated with invasive alien species are found in a wide range of cargoes. Japan recognizes that halting the spread of invasive small organisms at the port of destination is not enough. Unless all trading partners will ensure that the sea container don't spill over invasive small organisms, along this important pathway, the harbor cost of invasive alien species on biodiversity will continue to increase. Therefore, Japan proposed to add a new subparagraph in Plus 7 as follows: to request the Executive Secretary to collaborate with interagency liaison group and private sector for harmonizing the operation of sea container transport. Japan also requests amendment of Section B of Annex 5 to include the element of harmonizing of operation measures of sea containers in order to prevent an intentional spread of invasive small organisms. We submit detailed text in writing. Finally, Chair Kind allow Japan at this occasion to announce that we are organizing a webinar on the prevention of unintentional introduction of invasive alien species next month under a comprehensive and progressive agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. And during the webinar, participants are invited to develop a common understanding on the challenge of stakeholders and the need to promote effective measures on sea containers. The outcome will be submitted as an information for the process of CAMP 15 and others. After consultation with the Secretariat of the Convention. Thank you.
Arigatou gozaimashita, Japan, and I wish you all the best in these webinars and look forward to see the outcomes. Now I give the floor to Uganda, followed by South Africa and Samoa. Uganda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Uganda submitted a statement during the virtual sessions. We reaffirm our support for the guidance provided by the expert group on invasive alien species. However, we support inclusion of a specific target on invasive alien species and a globally harmonized labeling system for consignment of environmentally hazardous living organisms and other measures in collaboration with other parties. We propose that more effort is made to operationalize the implementation mechanism, for example, by capacity building, technology transfer or exchange, and provision of adequate resources. Uganda emphasizes the north to south and south to south transfer of capacity and technology enhancement efforts. And we emphasize that this will fast track implementation of the elements of guidance on the management of invasive alien species. That's our statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Uganda. Now we'll give the floor to South Africa, followed by Samoa and Australia. South Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa is making the statement in support to the original statement made during the informal session. South Africa notes the outcomes of the ad hoc technical expert group on invasive alien species and its report as annexed to the present document. Mr. Chair, the globalization of trade, travel, and transport continue to exacerbate the increase in number of invasive alien species introduced in South Africa, while connecting most of the Southern development community with the world. Therefore, we would like to reiterate previous COP decisions which invited parties, other governments and relevant bodies to make available relevant information, including the results of risk assessments on invasive alien species and list of species, as well as the national invasive species strategies and action plans. In terms of the suggested recommendations for adoption by South Africa would like to propose that Para 3 be moved to COP 15 recommendations, while acknowledging the efforts made by the Secretariat. We also like to support the statement made by Canada on the possible development of the global harmonized labeling system for consignment of living organisms that pose hazard or risk to biological diversity relating to invasive species, and believe the system should be based on sound science. With regard to the suggested recommendation for adoption by COP15, South Africa recognized that anthropogenic changes in the environment add further complexity and increase the risk of biological invasion and consequent threats to biodiversity, and further recognize that the elements of Annex 3 needs to be strengthened to provide an appropriate guidance in this regard. South Africa support the inclusion of indigenous people and local communities, women, youth, when assessing the cost benefits in line with the whole of government approach to the prioritization and management of invasive species. Mr. Chair, we will be submitting additional text proposal to the Secretariat on the draft recommendation and associated annex. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, South Africa. Now we'll give the floor to Samoa, followed by Australia and Portugal.
Thank you, Chair. Samoa welcomes the technical guidance of management measure of invasive species provided by the ad hoc technical expert group. The Pacific Island ecosystems make up one of the world's biodiversity hotspots with high presence of endemic species. However, invasive species is one of the leading drivers of biodiversity loss and cause of extinction on our biodiversity. Invasive species management is increasingly being used in Oceania and should be considered as an important tool in programs supporting adaptation and response to protect native biodiversity, natural resources, food security, economic development, human health, and ecosystems services. The strong reliance on imported goods with large volume container trade makes our island susceptible to continued reintroduction of pest species. For this reason, ports and shipyards are a standard high priority site for biosecurity and invasive species management. We would also like to stress that the impact of the COVID pandemic has increased the demand of online trade through postal and express couriers, thus changing transport and movement patterns, which raises concerns in our country, especially if no proper tools, management, or detection facilities are in place to monitor the movement of invasive species in the islands. Hence, we stress the importance of developing methods, tools, and mechanisms that can be used for identification of commodities of concern, which may minimize the potential risk of introduction and spread of invasive species. And we would like to propose to include in Annex 5B the unintentional introduction of invasive species via sea containers and cargoes to reflect this as an additional pathway of the introduction of invasive species. We'd also welcome the advice of the ad hoc technical expert group on awareness raising, capacity building, and training programs across the sectors, including tourism, and would like to emphasize the importance of also building the capacity, training, and engagement of our local communities in the management of invasive species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Samoa. Now we give the floor to Australia, followed by Portugal and Ecuador.
Thank you, Chair. Australia would like to thank the Executive Secretary and parties for their continued effort in addressing invasive alien species. Australia remains supportive of the Convention developing practical, science-based guidance on managing invasive alien species that is complementary and consistent with existing national standards and obligations, and therefore welcomes the development of supplementary advice on the risks posed by invasive alien species in transport and cross-border e-commerce to be implemented by parties on a voluntary basis. To this end, we are suggesting two minor text amendments to draft COP decisions 2 and 7B to reflect this view. So under the draft COP decisions, the second paragraph, we're proposing the insertion of voluntary ahead of guidance, so that it reads, endorses the following elements of voluntary guidance. And similarly, under 7B, again, inserting the word voluntary ahead of guidance, so that it reads, to develop tools and voluntary guidance. Additionally, in relation to Subsidiary draft recommendation 3, Australia notes that any globally harmonised labelling system for consignments of environmentally hazardous living organisms will need to have regard to World Trade Organization obligations, which WTO members who are also CBD parties are bound by, and suggests that the recommendation reflect the need for parties to review the proposal and for advice to be sought from the WTO Secretariat about relevant obligations that would need to be taken into account before it is submitted. We have specific text changes to reflect this, which we would be happy to read out. So following subcommittee of experts on the transport of dangerous goods, we're proposing the following insertion, comma, following review by parties, comma. Within the same paragraph, we also want to make a subsequent change. After interagency liaison group of invasive alien species, inserting, comma, the World Trade Organization Secretariat, comma. In relation to the annexes, we note that there are appropriate references to Indigenous peoples and local communities in Annexes 1 and 2. We would also like to see the importance of IPLCs reflected in Annex 3 to ensure the meaningful participation of IPLCs and recognition of and respect for Indigenous self-developed biocultural indicators, early warning systems and solutions. We do have additional subpara that we would like to add to that, but noting the time, we might just submit that in our written statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia. We look forward to see your written statement. I will give the floor to Portugal, followed by Ecuador and Peru. Portugal.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to add some comments to the statement delivered by Portugal in the informal meeting. Regarding the suggested recommendation within Section 2 of the document CBD SBSTTA-24, we recall that the elements of guidance developed on the basis of the work of the ATEG group are already included in earlier COP decisions. However, we recognize that these elements represent an effort to go beyond Decision 14/11 in addressing relevant issues about the impacts of invasive alien species and how to deal with them. Portugal emphasizes that managing all pathways for intentional or accidental introduction of alien species should be the focus of action, rather than preventing new introductions or the establishment of this taxa, which might prove to be more difficult. In this regard, considering that marine species still represent a significant number of newly recorded introductions, a special attention should be given to pathways related with their introduction and spread, namely via the definition of dedicated action plans. Addressing pathways like shipping and aquaculture, among others, and the effective implementation of the Ballast Waters Management Convention would be paramount to reduce the risk of introduction and spread of alien species. Accordingly, it must be ensured that marine pathways for the introduction of alien species are properly and realistically addressed within the post-2020 GBF. Finally, Portugal considers that the implementation of lists that specify which alien species may be used and restrict the remainder, white lists, could be one more valuable tool in the management of pathways of unintentional introduction of alien species. Nevertheless, the development of such lists should not be mandatory, but an option for parties, subject to availability of resources and in compliance with the multilateral agreements and the guidelines already implemented. We will submit our written amendments to the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Obrigado, Portugal. Now we give the floor, tiene la palabra Ecuador, seguido de Perú.
So Ecuador, followed by Peru, please. Thank you, Chair. And greetings to all of the distinguished delegates. Ecuador thanks you for the information in SBSTTA-24/10 and the guidance that we see developed on the basis of the work of ATEG. Ecuador appreciates the fact that the World Customs Organization has included IAS in its framework of standards on cross-border e-commerce to strengthen controls at entry points and also international cooperation schemes when it comes to the exchange of information and traceability in the different areas of action each convention. On the documents itself, we'd like to suggest the following. On Annex 1, Ecuador thinks that it's important that within the guidance that's provided, the Secretariat should make available to the parties formats to be able to carry out risk analysis and other types of methodology within the CHM. And we want to have study cases so that we can share of this between parties. Turning now to Annex 2, Ecuador, I think that it's important to generate and reinforce capacities within local authorities so that we can be more effective and have more operationalization of national and international standards, and there needs to be access to funding. That's a condition to be able to carry out our work. Then on Annex 3, Ecuador suggests that after M in paragraph 2, we should include the following actions. The Secretariat will urge the relevant organizations to generate a list of organizations that are considered as sleeper species or potentially invasive species that need to be controlled by the parties, and the Secretary should urge the relevant organizations to generate voluntary protocols for early detection and rapid responses for easy implementation by the parties. And I'm afraid the speaker cut out there. I couldn't catch the end of that. And then in Annex 5, we suggest that after paragraph 11, we should say that the Secretary will urge the relevant organizations to achieve participation of interested groups at all levels to develop standards to stop maritime entry of IES, including monitoring of navigational routes and the generation of specific protocols for fragile ecosystems that are not sufficiently protected. And I'm afraid we did not have the text there. I shall now give the floor to Peru. Thank you, Chair. I would like to congratulate the Secretary for the work that's been carried out and also what's been drawn up by the ATEG, which gives us orientation and framework for dealing with the IES, and at the same time we recognise the work that's been carried out by the Interagency Liaison Group on IES within the WCO, because that is key to deal with the risks of LMOs as goods that are dangerous for the environment. And Peru is very much in favour of including IES in the technical specifications within the WCO framework of standards on cross-border e-commerce, and that will mean that it will be easier to regional and national and local level to deal with all this. And we'd like to highlight the importance of the work of the Executive Secretary to present a proposal on a globally harmonised labelling system for consignments of LMOs that are environmentally hazardous, and we think that would be very useful when it comes to managing IES. We would also like to introduce a new paragraph where we'd encourage parties to create a capacity to take action at a national level to deal with the guidance that's been developed by the ATEG, which offer an orientation framework for management of IES, and we would call on the funding institutions and development organizations and other donors to promote priorities for IES management and support countries that are described in decision 8/27 paragraph 4 in order to improve prevention, rapid response and the implementation of the guidelines or the guidance laid out in the annex. And then finally, Chair, we've got various amendments to the draft decision of the COP and the 5 annexes. And so we will attach to this statement a table where we will point out these technical modifications to the text. Thank you very much, Peru.
We have two parties asking for the floor. With this, we will finish the list of parties and to allow some time for, I hope, at least a couple of interventions from observers. We have very limited time. We have 20 minutes, and also we need to address the way forward on this point. And I also, as I said before, I'd like to give some information on new and emerging issues before closing our last plenary. So I'll give the floor to Israel, followed by Italy. Israel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Israel welcomes the work of the Ad Hoc Technical Expert Group on Invasive Alien Species. And in Israel, invasive species is an especially important issue due to our location in the Mediterranean Sea, which is very affected by invasive species. We'll keep our comments short. Basically, we feel the answers need to recommend greater actions by parties to prevent new introductions, especially through waterways and corridors. Monitoring these corridors isn't necessarily going to be enough. So, for example, in Annex 5, where on additional advice and technical guidance, we propose a small change to paragraph 10. At the end of the sentence, paragraph 10, we would add that as well as establishing early warning and rapid response systems, we would add as well as researching and employing methodologies to reduce new invasions through these channels. And hopefully these kind of efforts will reduce new invasions, not just monitor them. We'll send our comments, of course, by writing to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Israel. Last part intervention, Italy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, thank you. Yes. First of all, Italy would like to welcome the online forum on invasive alien species and acknowledges the outcomes of the meeting and of the ATEC on invasive alien species, including the advice and guidance pertaining to the use of sanitary and phytosanitary measures also as a means to reduce the risk of diseases, introduction and outbreaks. Invasive alien species are indeed a major threat to biodiversity and related ecosystem services, including food, fiber, and timber production, sustainable development, and human well-being. And Italy outlines in section 2 the need to take into account the significance of invasive alien species in the work on the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, particularly by including synthetic biology, the need to address the consequences of large-scale releases of alien translocated populations, the role of invasive alien species in the transmission of plant and animal, as well as human diseases, and the need to develop open access portals. In this respect, Italy would like to recall that we host the main global database, namely the Global Register of Introduced and Invasive Species, the Global Invasive Species Database, and the AICAT, all implemented with the scientific leadership of IUCN. Italy is keen to support the improvement of such tools, in particular integrating information on the impacts of invasive alien species on human health. And in relation to the annexes, Italy would like to support what has been just before said by Portugal on the need to consider the content to have a substantial revision before they could be endorsed. And in particular, Italy would like to consider that the target on invasive alien species should include the concept of safe trade and consider both intentional and unintentional introduction of invasive alien species. And then finally, the approach of how to measure indicators should take into account components such as communications, resource mobilization, and capacity building. And Italy will submit written contribution on this agenda item. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Italy. With this, we finish intervention from parties. We have almost 15 minutes to do all things I want. I'm going to give the floor to two major groups that already registered requesting for the floor. Please be as brief as possible. And you know, parties can support interventions through the chat because I need to give more announcements before the closing. So I'll give the floor on behalf of IPLCs to TEFTIBA. Preston Harrison, you have the floor. Tiptiba. If Tiptiba is not ready, then I'll give the floor to second major group of observers on behalf of women organizations, FARM. FARM, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the CBD Women Caucus. We have concrete text suggestions for document CBD SBSTTA-24/10 on Annex 1, on Para 2, add women and youth, in addition to indigenous peoples and local communities at the national, regional, and local levels. On Para 6, 8, and 10, also add women and youth, in addition to IPLCs. On Annex 2, Section A, suggestion actions for national authorities, border agencies. Point 1, stakeholder engagement. Para 6, add women and youth for detection of early incursion, establishment, or spread of e-commerce derived invasive alien species across traditional lands and waters. Point 3, monitoring and compliance. Para 12, add women and youth, so that it would read and relevant information from IPLCs with free, prior, and informed consent, women and youth to inform risk-based inspections and determine if investigation or enforcement action is needed. On Annex 3, Section A, prediction, add a sub-para N to Para 2 that would read to identify negative and positive impacts of invasive alien species on biodiversity and ecosystem services arising from climate change, differentiated by gender. On Section B, planning and prevention, Para 3G would read to raise public awareness of changing invasive alien species threats arising from climate change and include, instead of encourage, the participation of or engage the public and all relevant sectors in response planning, including indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth. And on Annex 5, Section B, advice on management-specific pathways. Point 1, interbasin water transfer and navigational canals. Para 11, add women and youth. And on Section C, advice on capacity building activities. Para 25, add women and youth on training programs, as well as to the end of Para 27J. We have uploaded our statement and look forward to support from parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Fan. Now we'll give the floor again to Tiptiba. Please go straight to your suggestions on recommendations, so I can maybe give the time for couple observers, but we're running out of time. So
thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to make the following proposals. First of all, we thank Australia for their support and look forward to reading their submitted text. Like Australia, unlike in Annex 1 and 2, there are no references in Annex 3 to Indigenous peoples and local communities, and they should be included in elements in order to operationalize elements of the preamble. We propose the development of text for regional workshops for Indigenous peoples and local communities on invasive alien species and climate change, as well as other capacity building activities. In Annex 3, Section B on planning and prevention, we propose paragraph 2, bis, but we are neutral as to its actual placement. And the text would read as follows: ensure the meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities, their biocultural indicators, early identification and warning systems, and traditional knowledge in the development of predictions of invasive alien species under climate change with their prior informed consent, free prior and informed consent, or approval and involvement. In Annex 3, Section C on the management, in Item 3, we propose a new paragraph, paragraph F, collect the best practices of Indigenous peoples and local communities on the monitoring, control, and mitigation of the impacts of invasive alien species, diseases, and shifting species caused by climate change, subject to their prior and informed consent, or free prior and informed consent, or approval and involvement. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We look for party support for our proposals.
Thank you very much, Steptiva. Now I give the floor to IUCN. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to all. IUCN supports the findings of the Ad Hoc Technical Expert Group on Invasive Alien Species. There remains an urgent need to prioritize pathways of introduction for preventing invasions and also to prioritize their effective management. IUCN also agrees that coordinated national strategies and action plans are key to implementing such actions. IUCN supports the call for the collation and dissemination of knowledge and data on the socio-economic and cultural impacts of invasive alien species, including on human health. IUCN recently launched the Environmental Impact Classification for Alien Taxa, and the IUCN Invasive Species Specialist Group continues to develop its sister scheme, the Socio-Economic Impact Classification for Alien Taxa. In addition, IUCN Invasive Species Specialist Group has led the development of the Global Register of Introduced and Invasive Species, which presents verified national checklists of introduced and invasive species available on the CBD country profile page. Through its tools, datasets, indicators, and networks, IUCN is ready to support and help parties and others in developing and implementing science-based national strategies and policies required to meet a post-2020 target on alien invasive species and help monitor its progress. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, IUCN, and for always excellent support to our convention. Now, the last intervention from observers, I give the floor to FAO. FAO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak on behalf of FAO and the International Plant Protection Convention Secretariat. We too welcome the advice in the document, and we'd like to remind members that the CBD Secretariat and the IPC Secretariat have a joint work plan, which includes work on invasive alien species. It should be noted that some of the following points have been already highlighted in some interventions, so I just wanted to show that we're doing some work on those. We emphasize the need to work with national plant protection organizations, as engaging in these organizations in the management of invasive alien species, you can get the entire phytosanitary infrastructure to help you manage these. We encourage the use of international standards, which has been said many times, and we want to make sure that you use these standards or you provide science-based options for their management. The Commission on Phytosanitary Measures recently adopted an IPC strategic framework, and one of the main objectives is to protect the environment from the impacts of plant pests. We believe that in developing relevant indicators, CBD parties should take into account the shared mandate of the IPC and the CBD in relation to invasive alien species. While being of a key concern to the CBD, invasive alien species, which are pests of plants, are also a key concern to the IPC community. And yet there is no mention of the IPC nor ISPMs in the draft, which may be something you would like to consider. With regard to e-commerce, I would like to highlight that we have developed an informal network for e-commerce experts, and we're also developing a guide on the related matter. Also highlighting that we have a Sea Container Task Force, which has been meeting. It's composed of representatives of many countries as well as several international organizations, and they will end their mandate at the end of this year, and we hope their recommendations that will be presented to the CPM in 2020 will help address many of the issues associated with invasive alien species. Currently, the document has and then finally, I would like to also highlight that the Commission on Phytosanitary Measures has working right now a focus group on pest outbreak alert and response system. And we hope that some of these recommendations will also help to address invasive alien species. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the very last observer. I give the floor to Island Conservation.
Thank you, Chair. Invasive alien species cause drivers of disease and extinction. As such, we support Australia and Chile, the IUCN, in their statements, as well as the ITAG, and would like to emphasize the need for new tools in the document for the management of invasive alien species. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, colleagues, I see with this we finish interventions on agenda item 10. I see that we have a lot of common understanding on this issue, but also a number of specific suggestions for the draft recommendations, including on the modalities for the way forward. I will therefore consult with the Bureau, Subsidiary Bureau, and the Secretariat before determining the best way forward on this, including the possible establishment of a contact group or other ways to finalize our work, taking into account our very constrained timetable in this session. It was a very rich session on comments and taking into account. So we will proceed with this here, people. Maybe we will need the help of a contact group. So I will inform you later. So with this, we finish our deliberations in item 10. It's almost 10, so we need to close the session. But before we complete the day at this block on plenary session, I would like to address an issue raised by some parties during consideration of item 4 on synthetic biology during Sunday's plenary. This is a topic of new and emerging issues raised during that first reading. I would like to remind you that SBSTTA has been requested by the COP to contribute with the completion of the analysis request in Decision 1224, paragraph 2. Therefore, after hearing your diverse views, I have decided to convene a Friends of the Chair group to help me to address this point. Bearing in mind that SBSTTA 23 defer these decisions to SBSTTA 24, the mandate of the Friends of the Chair group will be to work on a text proposal to support SBSTTA and making its recommendation to COP on the relationship between synthetic biology and the criteria on new and emerging issues as contained in paragraph 12 of Decision 929. I have heard clear views on matters under consideration from, and I will read the list of parties: Finland, Mexico, Canada, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Austria, Japan, Australia, Norway, Ethiopia, and the European Union. I am inviting these parties to be my friends and join the group. Secretariat will contact your delegations to get the names and contact information of the colleagues, one per party to speak, and one other as a backup in case of technical issues, who will work in the group. The time and format for the work of this group of friends will be communicated to the members to the group later. Outcomes of the Friends of the Chair group will be considered at plenary when addressing item 4. my Substa Bureau colleague, Helena Brown, from Antigua and Barbuda, kindly agree to help me and facilitate this Friends of the Chairs group. I wish my friends a successful session. Now, in closing, I would like to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of participants, especially those in the Asia-Pacific region who have spent sleepless nights with us, to my colleagues of Subsidiary Bureau, to co-chairs of contact groups, interpreters, technical support staff at Interaction, and substantive technical and logistical staff at the Secretariat. Thank you all. I remind you to be sure to check the schedule tab on the meeting homepage on a regular basis. So it will be up to date on the schedule for meetings of plenary sessions and contact groups and the agenda items scheduled to be addressed, as well as the availability of any CRP on non-papers. We will reconvene in plenary on Monday, 7 June at 10 a.m. Montreal time. I do thank you for your cooperation today. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.